Attention passengers, we've now reached our destination. We hope you enjoyed the flight and have a nice day.
3 years ago, I had a terrifying experience at an airport. A young woman and a man approached me, trying to sell me a digital magazine subscription. As a courtesy, they offered me a small cup of coffee. Shortly after drinking it, I started feeling dizzy and disoriented. The woman grabbed my arm, and along with the man, they began leading me somewhere. I quickly realized something was wrong when I felt too weak to think clearly. In a moment of desperation, I threw myself to the ground on purpose. A couple happened to walk by, and I clung to the woman's legs, barely able to move or speak because of how dizzy I was. Suddenly, the woman and the man who gave me the coffee vanished. Airport security arrived shortly after and saved me. It took hours for me to feel normal again. The federal police reviewed the security cameras, but the pair had disappeared without a trace. To this day, I still don't know what their intentions were, but I'm grateful I managed to escape. This didn't happen at an airport, but at a bus station. I had traveled to my hometown, and shortly after arriving, a strange man approached me. He started asking if I spoke English, if I knew the city, and other similar questions. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, a black car pulled up in front of us, and the window rolled down. The man stood close to me, and two others got out of the car. One stood in front of me, and the other behind me, effectively blocking my way. I immediately grabbed onto a railing and refused to let go. The man kept pressuring me to go with him, but I held on tightly until my uncle arrived to pick me up. My uncle kept honking to get my attention, but I wouldn't move. When he finally got close, the three men quickly jumped back into the car and sped off. Later, I found out that similar incidents had happened to other women traveling by bus. It was a terrifying experience, and I'm grateful I managed to stay safe. Something very strange happened to me at an airport in Norway. My husband was watching our luggage while I went to the restroom. As I was leaving, a woman around 48 years old stopped me at the door. She tried to speak Spanish, but she had an African accent. She asked where the restroom was, and I pointed to the door. Then she started saying other things I couldn't understand. I kept pointing to the restroom and began walking toward where my husband was. That's when she clearly said, "Come with me to help me," and tried to pull me by the arm. At that moment, I froze. I pulled my arm away and said, "I'm with my husband. Take care of it yourself. I'm sorry." That's when I realized it might have been an attempted abduction. It was a terrifying experience. My older brother, who's grown up now, was almost kidnapped at an airport when he was a baby. My parents were heading to the restroom, and my brother went with my dad. While my dad was distracted, my brother, being a curious little kid, wandered off without my dad noticing. He ended up heading toward the women's restroom, probably looking for my mom. Somewhere along the way, someone saw him and grabbed him, running toward the escalators in Terminal 2. When my dad realized my brother was missing, he ran out of the restroom in a panic, looking everywhere. Then, he spun around, picked a direction, and ran straight toward the escalators. There, he saw a man holding my brother and heading down the escalator. Without hesitation, my dad sprinted after them, like a scene straight out of a movie, and shoved the man, yelling, "Give me my son!" The man stammered something about trying to help because the baby was lost, but it was clear something wasn't right. It was a terrifying experience, and we're so lucky that my dad acted so quickly. This really happened, and it could have ended very differently. This year, on my flight back from Paris to Brazil, something very strange happened. A woman sitting next to me started a conversation and, at some point, asked if I could help her by carrying one of her checked bags through customs when we arrived in Brazil. She explained that she had 3 bags and wanted to avoid any issues with customs authorities. I felt uncomfortable and immediately refused. Then, She turned to another passenger sitting on her other side, a younger girl, and made the same request. Coincidentally, I still keep in touch with this girl, and she also refused to help. What was really odd was that about 15 minutes later, the woman suddenly got up and moved to the back of the plane without saying anything. I'm not sure what her intentions were or what she was planning, but the whole situation felt very suspicious, so I thought I'd share it. When I was younger, I had a strange experience while waiting for a flight. My mom, who was elderly, and I were sitting in a nearly empty waiting area with my 3 younger siblings, who were just kids at the time. Out of nowhere, a woman with no luggage came and sat right in front of us, even though there were plenty of empty seats around. She opened a box of chocolates, placed it on the seat next to her, and kept looking at us, almost as if she was waiting for one of the kids to ask for some. Eventually, one of my siblings asked for a chocolate, but my mom didn't allow it. A little while later, one of my siblings said they needed to use the restroom, and the woman immediately offered to take them. It was strange because there wasn't even a restroom nearby. Right at that moment, my older siblings and my dad showed up, and as soon as they arrived, the woman got up and left without a word. We still don't know what her intentions were, but looking back, it gives me chills. In Istanbul, I had one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I was traveling with my mom and cousin, and everything seemed normal when we arrived at the check-in counter. There was an airport staff member standing nearby, fully uniformed, with a badge and credentials. He appeared to be part of the special assistance team for people with disabilities or mobility needs. As part of the assistance, I sat in a motorized wheelchair. That's when things took a dark turn. The man suddenly pushed me into a disabled access restroom, locked the door, and trapped me inside. I fought back immediately. Luckily, I'm 1.75 meters tall, and he barely reached my shoulder. I managed to create a barrier between us by using the wheelchair, and we struggled as I tried to unlock the door while he tried to keep it shut. By some miracle, I escaped. But the thought still haunts me. How many people couldn't? I reported the incident to airport police, but instead of helping, they seemed determined to make me miss my flight. Sensing the risk of being stranded or worse, I reluctantly signed a document they demanded. The statement falsely claimed I had misunderstood the situation, that I knew the man, and that I had invited him into the restroom. I added a note saying I was signing under duress because my flight was delayed. After I signed, one of the officers ripped the document in front of me. I rushed to board my flight, only to find the same man assisting other disabled passengers onto the plane. It was horrifying. Throughout the flight, I kept asking the flight attendants to confirm we were going to the correct destination. It felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. This experience still shakes me to this day. My mom's employer's family had a terrifying experience at an international airport. She has a set of twins, a boy and a girl, and during their time at the airport, her daughter suddenly disappeared in the middle of the crowd. After a frantic search, they found her in the bathroom, terrified and visibly shaken. Her hair had been cut short to resemble a boy's hairstyle, and she was dressed in different clothes than the ones she had been wearing. The girl, only 8 years old, later explained that someone had forced her to hide in one of the bathroom stalls. It was a horrifying ordeal, and it's chilling to think what could have happened if she hadn't been found in time. During one of my trips, a woman approached me claiming to be traveling alone and lost. At first, I didn't think much of it and tried to help her, but as we talked, her questions started to feel strange. She asked oddly specific things, like my age, if I was traveling alone, and other personal details, as if she was fishing for information. That's when I became suspicious. I lied about everything she asked, and gave her only the basic directions she needed to catch her flight. I tried to distance myself, but she kept sticking close to me, refusing to leave my side. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she really was just lost. But my gut told me otherwise. I felt so uneasy that I eventually told her I wanted to be alone, then quickly disappeared from her sight. To this day, I wonder if she was being used by someone else for something sinister. I'll never know, but I'm glad I trusted my instincts. In 2021, I traveled alone from Brasilia to Sao Paulo. There was an empty seat next to me, and a woman approached, asking if she could sit there because she was afraid and wanted someone to talk to during the flight. Being polite, I said I didn't mind. We chatted throughout the trip, and at some point she asked if I was traveling for work or if I lived in Sao Paulo. I mentioned that I lived in Brasilia, but my sisters lived in Sao Paulo. She kept the conversation going, asking if I liked Sao Paulo and where my sisters lived. Without thinking much of it, I innocently shared the information. Later, she asked which sister's house I was staying at, and I mentioned it was in a specific neighborhood. That's when she said, "Oh, what a coincidence. I live there too. My son is picking me up at the airport. We can give you a ride to your sister's apartment. It would be a pleasure." Well, of course, I politely declined, but it wasn't until later that I realized this could have been a setup for something dangerous. At the time, I didn't even consider the possibility of it being an attempted kidnapping, but looking back, it gives me chills.